our topic today is romantic attraction. What do we look for in a romantic partner? Which one of these ads would you most likely be interested in answering? Lonely person, sensitive, fun, music and animal lover, looking for someone to love. How sweet. Or would you most likely go for the other person, wild animal, loves drugs, sex, and rock and roll. No commitments, just looking for a good time. Well, it might surprise you what really turns us on. Would you believe that you are most attracted to your mom or dad, or even yourself? Oh no, how could this possibly be? They've done studies where they flash pictures in front of people's eyes, and they were so fast that people didn't have a chance to really recognize anybody, so they just had to quickly rate whether they were attracted to them or not. And in those pictures, they would put pictures of their mom and dad. And whenever they would flash those pictures, even without having time to recognize who they were, people would click that they would be attracted to that person. That's why you so often see a girl dating a guy who so much resembles her father, and vice versa for a guy dating a woman who resembles mom. Now, what about yourself? We look in the mirror every day, so we get so used to seeing ourselves, and the same thing occurs. We start looking for somebody who has similar features to us. That's why when you look at so many couples, you think, how did they get together? It almost they look like brothers and sisters. They look so much alike. That's because we look in the mirror every day and see something that we eventually become attracted to, just because of mirror exposure. We'll talk about mirror exposure here in a few minutes as well for other people. Now, what about your voice? Now, we all think we hate to hear our voice when we listen to ourselves on a tape, or like me when I listen to this video, and I think, oh God, I hate my voice. Actually, they've done studies again, and they will let people listen to voices, short clips of different voices, and interspersed in there, unbeknownst to them, will be short videos of their own voice. We tend not to recognize our own voice, but in those short clips, when they're just trying to recognize whether they are attracted to somebody's voice, when they hear their own voice and they don't realize it's theirs, people really are attracted to their own voice. So those kind of things, by mere exposure, our own face, our own voice, we're very much attracted to. The evolutionary theory of attractiveness tells us we're most attracted to somebody who has good genes and will be a good candidate to pass on our genes. Now, how do we know who has good genes? Well, one thing we look for is a symmetrical face. If you look at these two men in the top photos, one man has a very asymmetrical face. The other man, I assume you think is more attractive, has very symmetrical features. Symmetrical features gives us an idea that somebody is healthy and probably has good genes. Now, we might think that we love somebody or are attracted to somebody because they are extremely unusually beautiful. Unusual is not beautiful. We are attracted to average. So average features equals attractive for us. For the man, if you look at the bottom picture, a man is more attractive if he has very angular, sharp, masculine features. Soft features are not attractive in a man. So what features do women find attractive in men? We will look at some of these studies later on in this lesson, but assertiveness tends to be rated as most attractive for men. So we'll look at a study where men are passive versus aggressive or assertive. Women, by far, rate the assertive man as more attractive. They've done studies where they let women listen to voices of different men, all different pitch levels, all different levels of high to deep. Women rate most attractive men who have a deep voice. Again, that could be for lots of reasons, but one reason might be that women think those men are more masculine and are more able to care for their children and protect them. It's obvious, but there's also been studies done that we are also most attractive to people with a sense of humor. In fact, men are more attracted to women with a good sense of humor than the other way around, even though women are more attracted to men with a sense of humor as well. Another interesting study was done where they took pictures of a variety of men and had women on the street rate them. They would rate them fairly honestly as unattractive to very attractive. Then they went back out with the same pictures. The only difference was they included in the little biography of this man how much money the man made. A picture that women rated as highly attractive before, when they paired it with a salary of, say, $20,000, all of a sudden this same picture was rated very unattractive. Some of the men who were initially rated as unattractive, when they were paired with a salary of, say, $350,000, now women started rating these men as very attractive. So men are not the only sex that can be fickle. Women can be very fickle as well and rate money much higher than physical attractiveness. And of course, anything that shows us that we have good health would be attractive to women as well. What is a female ideal? What do men rate as more attractive? Well, in general, men rate women more highly on their physical features than other features. Neoteny in the face, and that's a term that you might not be familiar with, but neoteny is a young, more baby-like face, a soft face. Men tend to prefer women with baby faces, soft faces. They also rate women that have average features. Again, we don't want anything strikingly unusual. We go for average. When you look at their body, the ideal proportions for a woman is a waist-to-hip ratio of 0.7. That means the waist is 70% of the size of the hips. For example, a woman who has a hip circumference of 35 inches ideally should have a waist circumference of about 25 inches. Again, all these things point out that a woman has good genes and will most likely carry our genes on into the next generation. We talked about mirror exposure effect when we talked about looking at ourselves in the mirror or looking at our mom and dad and eventually finding that as the attractive or the ideal. Moreland and Beach did a study of mirror exposure in the classroom. They had a large classroom and they had 4 different women come into the classroom. One never came into the classroom. One came in 5 times during the semester. One came in 10 times during the semester. And one came in 15 times during the semester. They had no interaction with the other students. They just walked in, sat in class like a student, and then left. At the end of the semester, they had the people in the class rate the attractiveness of these women. But what they found is the woman who had come to the class the most was rated as most attractive. So mirror exposure has strong effects on attraction. Walker and Voll looked at another aspect of attraction, and I'll call that the cheerleader effect. If you look at these pictures, look at the woman by herself and decide how attractive you think she is. Then look at the woman in the group of 3 and decide how attractive you think she is. Now, you know it's the same picture, but most people rate the picture of this woman when she's in a group as much more attractive than when she's by herself. This is typical of most people. Individuals in a group seem to be more attractive. Now, some people think it's best to go out with a group of people much uglier than you, and that way it makes you seem more attractive by comparison. That is not necessarily true. What happens is we average the group together, and you get that average group rating. So if you go out with a bunch of very attractive people, you are perceived as being more attractive yourself because you rise to the average of that level of attractiveness. Another thing we want to look at in this lesson is body language. In this lesson, I want to look at 2 things. One is posture mirroring. This happens automatically. but it can also happen when we're trying to get somebody to be more attracted to us. What we do is we start mirroring parts of their posture. Now, it doesn't have to be exact. It can be a little more subtle. But even in these pictures, you see President Obama mirroring the person he's with. The other thing is movement echo. Now, watch people when they're out at dinner, especially couples. And you'll notice that when one person picks up their glass, very soon the other person will pick up their glass. When one person picks up the fork, very soon the other person will pick up his fork. Now, this is actually a sign of how closely attracted they are to each other and how close their relationship is. Couples who mirror each other and have movement echo very highly, most likely are going to stay together. If a couple is having dinner together and they don't echo each other's movement, it's not a good sign for a lasting relationship. Another interesting study on sexual attraction has been called the Rickety Bridge Study. This study was done by Dutton and Aaron in British Columbia. Both a man and a woman, equally attractive, stopped single men as they walked across the Capilano Suspension Bridge, high above the Capilano River. It has been rated as a scary bridge, one that produces anxiety in many people. The authors were trying to see if, under conditions of high anxiety, walking across this scary bridge, if it would raise sexual tension and sexual attraction. They also had a control bridge. The control bridge was over the same river, but it was only 10 feet above the river. It was very stable. Nobody was afraid to walk across that bridge. The researcher tested for attraction in two pretty interesting ways. One, they had the participants do a thematic apperception test. We'll talk more about thematic apperception test, but basically it's a picture that can be taken in many, many ways. And the picture they used was something similar to this. It was a woman with a hand over her face and another hand reaching out. And they just had to write a short story while they were on the bridge about this picture. Then they rated the story for sexual imagery. The other thing they did to test for sexual attraction is at the end of the questionnaire, the interviewer wrote her number down, or his number, on the sheet of paper, ripped it off, and said, if you're interested in finding out more about this experiment, give me a call. I'm staying at a local hotel. So they wanted to see how many of these people actually called the interviewer afterwards. What were the results? We look at both the number of men phoning the interviewer and the sexual imagery score of their thematic apperception test. When a female was the interviewer, when she was on the control bridge, the very stable, low bridge, only 2 of those men phoned her afterwards. When that woman was on the experimental bridge, the scary bridge, the high bridge, 9 of the 18 people phoned her afterwards. If we look at the sexual imagery of their thematic apperception test, they rate sexual imagery from 0, with no sexual imagery, to 5, high sexual imagery. As you can see, the men who talked to the interviewer on the experimental bridge had a much higher sexual imagery score of 2.47. The ones on the control bridge had a sexual imagery score of 1.41. Now, I want to call your attention to something called the p-value. The p-value is the probability that these differences can occur only by chance. And a p-value less than 0.01 means this was not a chance difference. This difference was statistically significant. That's an important feature that we'll talk about throughout this course. Now, I don't want you to think that the sexual imagery is like hugely different. A score of 1 would be something like, I want to go out with that person. That's the kind of sexual imagery we're talking about. A score of 3 is, I would like to kiss this person. And a score of 5 would be, I would like to have sex with this person. Now we look and see what happens if the interviewer was a male. If the male was on the experimental bridge, again scary, very few phone calls afterwards, and the sexual imagery score, very, very low, a 0.8. So almost no sexual imagery in those thematic apperception tests. The control bridge, again, only one person called, and the sexual imagery score of the thematic apperception test, very, very low, 0.6. NS means it was not a significant difference. Researchers have called this the misattribution of arousal. Anything that makes us aroused physiologically, we can try to figure out what is the source of that arousal. If we're with somebody, we can assume that that arousal is due to them. So, what are some things you can do to be more sexually attractive? Take a girl on a bungee jump. Give your date high caffeine. Take them to a scary movie. All these things raise physiologic arousal, and the person that is with the person with that high physiological arousal will seem more attractive as well. A similar study was done by Meston and Froelich, and they wrote about that in Love at First Fright. What they did is they went to a roller coaster at Six Flags in Texas, and they asked people to rate the attractiveness of pictures of the opposite sex before and after a roller coaster ride. They also asked them questions like, I would go out to the cinema with this person if I was asked to, or I would like this person to kiss me. What they found was the subjects in this study rated the pictures as far more attractive after the roller coaster ride than the subjects who rated the picture before the roller coaster ride. People after the roller coaster ride were also more likely to say they would want to date the person in that picture. An interesting take on excitation transfer was done by Edward Hurt, a psychologist at Indiana University. It's been shown that sports fans will have an increase in testosterone if their team wins a game. And if their team loses, they have a decrease in testosterone. He wanted to see if that affected how they felt about themselves in other ways. So he showed fans pictures of very attractive people after the game. He asked them to rate their ability to get a date with this very attractive person. The results were, if their team had just won the game, and the person's testosterone was higher, more than likely, they were much more optimistic about their sexual appeal after the victory, and much more likely to say that they would be able to get a date with that person after a victory. I'm going to end this lesson with a quote from Shakespeare. Truth, reason, and love keep little company together.